Hey everyone, it's Mace1370. We have some developer notes to go over. Before we get into it though, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also, please see the video description below for a link to my Discord, where I have a channel labeled My Stats, and it has all of the builds for all my heroes. Okay, so we have a new balance patch coming up here in a week or so. February 17th is when it hits, so I guess 2 weeks. And there are a lot of heroes that are getting buffed. Pretty crazy, actually. So we have, let's see, Solitary of the Snow, designer Lilibet. These are two ML5s that sorely need buffs, so it's great to see them on the list. Chloe, was not even aware that there were issues with Chloe. She seems like a fine Wyvern DPS. Celine is exciting because she's not super usable, really, in any place in the game right now. Green Lilibet is also getting a buff, and I guess she was kind of an extinction unit. I'm kind of curious to see what they do with her. Sinful Angelica is interesting. I feel like she has a place. She's just kind of outclassed in general. And then they're buffing some 3-stars for whatever reason. The artifacts here, pretty underwhelming. Cradle of Life, this artifact is pretty garbage. Some people might, use it for Wyvern 13 if you just don't have anything better. It can put some debuffs on them, but we have so many heroes that can farm Wyvern 13 now, and they're so specialized for that. I feel like Cradle of Life is really superfluous. Kind of similar, a Little Queen's Huge Crown. This is Chloe's artifact. For barrier things like the Wyvern, the barrier phase, I think you could use it for that, but beyond that, it's not very useful right now. So, I guess these are deserving of a buff. We'll see what they do. And then El's Fist, one of the more worthless 4-star artifacts. So, overall, just on the choices of the things that they've picked, I think this is all really good, right? These were the things up here, the two ML5s that most people said are really lacking right now. And they've picked some artifacts that are pretty irrelevant, so hopefully they will change them to make them more usable. Alright, so here is Solitaria of the Snow. So her kit, essentially beforehand, you had a single target stun on her skill 3 that put her in stealth, and then her skill 1 was an AoE that could stun and then also put like daydream debuffs on people, which that was kind of a permanent buff she had on, and I think they included it was hit down, decreased attack, unbuffable, and there might have been one other one. Maybe hit chance, decreased hit chance. So let's see what they did here. So this is her skill 1, and now it'll have a 75 chance to dispel 1 debuff. Okay. So before it had a 25% chance to stun, and then when you did it on her turn it was AoE. Now it has a 75% chance to dispel 1 buff. And then when she has Daydream, that's like her permanent buff that she always has. She activates Foosh Ha as an extra attack. So Foosh Ha attacks all enemies with mana with a 25% chance to stun for 1 turn. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so this is an extra attack, which means that it's not going to trigger counters, right? It's like SSB, her, when she's full focus, how she bats back, and that will not trigger counters, so this will operate the same way. Same thing with, Archdemon Mercedes, extra attack doesn't trigger counters. This was one of the main things that made her unusable, was her skill 1 was AoE, and, just like Rem, Violet, and everything would just, explode and blow up your team. So that's a really nice change. They've also kind of passively increased her damage output a little bit by making her attack one person and then go into an AoE here, because it sounds like this new Foosh Ha ability will deal the same damage as the original AoE damage of Pew Pew Pew. So you're getting that damage plus whatever the skill 1 damage is. Probably insignificant, but, more damage is always better for heroes, right? And the fact that this has a built-in strip, that's really interesting. This seems very powerful. Let's see what they did with her other thing. So here's her passive. It still decreases focus by 100%. At the start of the turn, she has a 100% chance to give herself Daydream, so she had that before. And at the end of the turn, she has a 100% chance to grant Stealth. Wow, so before her Stealth was tied to her skill 3, and it only lasted a couple turns. So for her to be perma-stealth, you had to soul burn her skill 3 over and over again, which meant that you kind of had to use book, or, bring a book holder if you wanted to keep her in stealth the whole time. It didn't really matter, she was pretty unusable, so people probably didn't bother with that. But now she does get stealth for free. That's interesting. And here is her skill 3. So before this granted her stealth for 2 turns. They took that away because that's built into her passive now. She just gets it for free. She still decreases the buff durations by 1 turn and then pushes them back by 30%. So that's still, a nice skill. And now this also gives her a barrier for 2 turns. and then it's proportionate to her max health. So this barrier here is going to help her stay in stealth, which was another issue she had. She could stealth, but then it was very easy to pop her out again just with an AoE attack and just kill her. That's pretty crazy. Wow. I guess this is like the before and after awakening. Does this decreases... This text looks pretty similar. It attacks with Starlight. Oh, stunning. Oh, the stun isn't written up here. That's the difference. So stunning for 1 turn, yeah. I mean, that's what she had before. Overall, this is a pretty crazy change. I think Solitaire is going to be very viable now. I'm sure people have already mentioned she's going to be really good with the F10 artifact. She's still going to be really good with Ayala Violin. If you only have one F10 artifact, that'll be another really good choice for her, because it'll, you know, AoE strip basically before the Daydream buffs get put down. And, you know, compared to Mercedes, I feel like Archdemon Mercedes is obviously very good with the F10 artifact, but it feels a little bit more RNG because you skill 1 and then you have to proc the skill 2 to get that bonus damage and the strip, right? The difference before when you were running Ayala Violin on Mercedes was you had Violin, so your skill 1 could strip. If the person had immunity, you wouldn't seal them, because I think the strip would happen after you hit them, but it was still nice to be able to strip away with immunity with it. So I guess you'll potentially, if you only have one copy, you might put the F10 one on Solitaria and maybe put Mercedes back on Ayala. Or if you ideally have 2 Ayala or 2 F10 artifacts, right? You could use them on both. That's kind of crazy. I think she will be weak to Unbuffable because, let's see, at the start of her turn, she has a chance to grant herself Daydream, and then at the end of the turn, she has a chance to give herself Stealth, but she doesn't have any Cleanse built into her kit. So if you have an opener with like Piera, for example, and you put Unbuffable on her, she's not going to get Daydream, she's not going to get Stealth, and that'll significantly reduce her effectiveness, right? She won't be able to go back into Stealth, she won't get the Daydream debuffs and all this other stuff. She'll still get the, the whoosh here. Or no, it's only when she's granted Daydream, so you turn that off, yeah. So I think Unbuffable is probably the way to deal with her. So we'll have to see how people end up drafting her, like how early they take her and stuff. But that'll be something to be aware of when you're using her. Okay, so here's Designer Lilibet. When an enemy's turn ends, gains 5. Okay, so here's her passive. So, she still gets the 50 fighting spirit, so she half fills up her bar at the start of the fight. But now they've doubled the amount of fighting spirit. Right now we get 10 for each debuff instead of 5. And this makes a big difference. I can just tell you right away. I've used her a few times, and it's very inconsistent when you can actually get her off. It feels like you need multiple heroes on the enemy team to take a turn before she will activate. So now this cuts that in half. So now one hero AoE debuffing your team is likely going to activate her and push her up, is kind of the difference here. And when the casters, it still dispels everything, and now she gets a free defense buff. This was another thing. You often had to bring her with a defense buffer, like Crow or Lencia or something like that. And now she just gets defense buff for free. And she still increases CR by 40%. So this change right here, just this by itself, makes her way more viable. And then also they're buffing her skill 3, I think. Yeah, this is her skill 3. So now they're just adding a 15% CR boost for your whole team when you do this. And it's an AoE attack, so you don't have to worry about it being like a passive thing, and triggering Politis and stuff like that. That's pretty crazy. So I think Designer Lilibet is going to be a pretty premium cleanser now, and she's going to really fill the role that I think we've been looking for a while. A cleanser who can do a little bit of damage, right, and provide team-wide utility, and doesn't have to rely on non-attack skills to cleanse. So I think this is going to make Politis worse, or at least, this will be something that you can take more safely, to cleanse your team into Politis. This is also going to give fits, I think, for Summertime Iseria players, because a lot of, when you have your team built around that comp, most people are not running immunity, right? And 40% is a huge boost. It's going to be really easy for you to cut over them. Iseria gives like a 15% boost or something to your team, so that's not very much. So there's a good chance that you're going to cut and then reset them. How much is her reset? It only increases her skill cooldown by 1 turn. Interesting. So maybe that actually won't be as much of a problem for Iceria, because she gets that free soul burn, right? So she can soul burn out of this decrease, right? She doesn't need her skill 3 on turn 1 anyways. So that may not be as much of a factor as I thought, but still annoying that you can cut and cleanse away the initial bombs. I still think that takes away a lot of punch from that combo. So this is, I think, going to be a hero that Iceria players are going to have to play around now, and just other, debuff focused teams. I think this is a pretty decent change. It's nice to have another cleanser who is somewhat on par with Ricky. He does so much more than just cleanse, so he's kind of in a league all of his own, but this was kind of a niche that has not really been filled. Like, Lilibet was there before, and Holiday Euphine was there before, and like neither of them just did enough to really work, I think. So interesting. It'll be neat to see how good she is. I think she'll be really good, though. So I think both of these will be worth mulling if you have either of them. They'll both be really strong. So here's Chloe. Gosh, I don't really remember what she does. She's kind of irrelevant. Her Magic Bolt inflicts Magic Nail, and Magic Nail is a debuff that just increases the damage they take, I think. And now it increases her combat readiness and increases her damage dealt. Okay. And here, let's see. Her Hyper Strike, they've decreased the damage and they've changed the cooldown to 3 turns, so they've reduced the cooldown. A 1 turn shorter skill cooldown. Okay. Oh, and then her exclusive equipment will now grant her increased attack. So they've essentially rolled in this exclusive equipment into her kit by always giving her this cooldown decrease now. And so now she can give herself an attack buff, which is one of the things that a lot of, DPS kind of need these days to be relevant. So let's see, more damage and heavy strike will have a shorter cooldown, and then to balance that, they'll slightly reduce the skill damage of Hyper Strike. So she'll basically just turn cycle better, and she'll have attack buff, so she'll just deal more damage. This, I think, looks like a PvE change, and they even say it here. More contribution in PvE battles like Wyvern. So I think they just make her a better Wyvern killer, which is, fine. We have a ton of Wyvern killers at this point, but it's nice to improve the ones that aren't as good, because not everyone has every hero, and Chloe is one of the ones that you can get in your selective summons, right? So it's nice to make those heroes more relevant for new players. Celine, what is she? Okay, so Celine was somebody who has kind of suffered. She never really found her footing in the meta, I think. Like, some people could draft her every so often, but it was kind of like very niche and kind of spotty as to how well she worked. So I'm interested to see what they do here. So Intuition, this was her passive, so it's still activated by a non-attack skill, but now it dispels all debuffs. Okay, and then it blinks, and then Blink also gives her a 20% CR boost. That's kind of neat. So her artifact gives her, it's at least 20%, it may be like, I think 45, I don't think it's higher than 45, but it's somewhere up there. So when you combine this with her artifact, she's getting like a 45% CR boost when they use a non-attack skill, that is huge. Lilibet has a 40% built into her kit, and it feels like when you build her at like 220 speed or something, or 230, you just cut like almost everything. So kind of, that's a big boost in order to cut the enemy team, which is probably trying to cleave you or something if you're drafting Celine. And so Thunderclap, this was her skill 3, so I see they took the Dispel from this and they put it into Blink, which is good because typically you would Blink and then you would want a skill 3, and your Blink would be kind of have a reduced effectiveness if like Politis, for example, just flat out stunned you or put like hit down on you or something like that. So now you get the Dispel right away. And this would be really good into Conquer Lilius, because if she skill 3 is to put attack down on you, it's just instantly cleansed and then you blink into something. She would, I guess, still be able to provoke, which would not be great. Let's see. So here's her Thunderclap, grants a barrier for 2 turns. And what did it do before? It gave her evasion. So sorry, she still gets evasion, and now she just gets a barrier on top of the evasion. I see. Okay, so that's, a lot of survivability. So that's nice. It looks like, it still gives her a heal. Oh, it looks like they're reducing the heal a bit because she's getting the barrier, so that kind of makes sense. So I think if you wanted to bring her into Lilius, you'd have to use her exclusive equipment that gives her stealth, I think, and because I think it gives it for 2 turns. So even if Lilius decreases your buff duration, you would still be in stealth. I'm not sure exactly like how the order of operations works there. I'd have to test it, but I think with stealth it would prevent the provoke, right? So then you could go into your skill 3, and you'd be cleansed. They'd still have vigor, which isn't amazing, but definitely better than it was before. So that's, you know, I think Celine is going to be a pretty solid unit. She doesn't seem overpowered. You know, she has a specific niche, right? Like you have to take her into non-attack heroes, or she's just not going to do anything. But I think now she's going to be a really kind of sticky DPS option you can take into certain teams, because you can build her with a bunch of damage, right? And now she's getting a huge CR boost. So that'll really relax the stat requirements you needed to build her, so you can put all those extra stats into more damage. And I don't think you really have to worry about HP and defense, because her barrier scales off of attack, and you're going to be stealth with evasion with a barrier. So remember, stealth is going to reduce AoE damage, then you can evade, reducing damage even more, and you have the barrier to keep yourself hidden. So I think Celine is going to be a very good unit. So that's exciting to see. Lilibet gets a buff. Honestly, I don't even remember what Lilibet does. All I remember is that she's an extinction unit, and I think she had hit chance, either with an exclusive equipment, or I don't know if it was in her kit. Looks like they're changing this a bit. They're giving her a CR boost, right? This is something that I talked about when we were, you know, looking at Lionheart Sirmia in the previous video. You kind of need a CR boost baked into your kit these days, only because everybody else has one, frankly. And if you don't have that, or if you don't have like something along those lines, like self-healing, then you just get outcycled over the course of the game, because all these other heroes are just going to be zooming around getting free CR boosts, or, you know, self-sustaining just baked into their kit, while, you know, you aren't doing that. So that's, I think Lionheart Sirmia is going to be a prime buff candidate in the future. Not that she's like unusable right now, but she's I don't think she was as bad as like Solitaria, obviously, or Designer Lilibet when they were released, but she's not at the same level as everybody else right now. She's like a little bit down. Anyway, so looking at Lilibet here, so they're giving her oh no, wait, did she already have the CR boost? I guess she already had it. I obviously have no idea what Lilibet did. But what are they changing? So they're changing the way her bleeds worked. And then this is going to decrease her skill cooldown by a turn. Oh, I see. So she'll just do the increased damage now. They don't have to be bleeding. And allows her to take the turn much earlier. I see. Okay. These changes feel kind of irrelevant. I don't know. I guess she could be okay. To be honest, I'd have to take a look at her and probably play her in a few matches to really get a sense of how she works. Nothing here looks particularly earth-shattering. It looks like they're just making her a little bit more consistent, which is fine. So she might have like a place in Guild Wars as an extinction unit. She might be more reliable for that, maybe. Oh, they're changing her exclusive equipment. Dispels 2 buffs before using Snip Snip. Okay. And oh, I see, before it increases her bleeding chance. Well, that'll probably help her. Yeah, whenever you get a self-cleanse, that helps a lot. So that's, you know, I think it'll just make her a little easier to use, more consistent. But at the end of the day, I think she's basically just going to be an extinction unit you take in Guild Wars into like RB and stuff like that. Here's Angelica. So what are they doing here? They're not changing a bunch. It looks like, oh, they're just giving her a Dispel from all allies on her skill 3. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. I don't know how super relevant that is, because you're usually building her to take the first turn. You usually build her like pretty fast, and then you take her at the end of a draft when they're not speed contesting you. Because if they do, you're pretty screwed. Since almost all the units that put unbuffable also put something else on. So I guess we'd have to test this and see which one it dispels. If it dispels the unbuffable, I guess that could be okay, but I think more than likely you're only going to dispel the unbuffable part of the time, and then this isn't going to do anything. So this change seems kind of irrelevant. Alright, well now we have some 3 stars. These are not super relevant units. just because they're 3 stars, their base stats are so low. You can't really build them to compete, even with very good gear. This doesn't really, nothing really super relevant in any of these. Lucy, like, she's like a bad healer. They're changing her cooldown, and even if they make her heal more, it doesn't really matter. Like, their base stats are so bad. Weakness shared cannot be dispelled. Okay. I mean, that's fine. These changes might be more relevant if these things get specialty changes down the line. Yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the 3 stars. Okay, let's take a look at the artifacts. Cradle of Life. So this thing just kind of put random debuffs on stuff. Looks like they are increasing the overall chance, and they're making it 2 turns, so that's a big change. 1 turn was pretty irrelevant. 2 turns is nice. And, oh, they got rid of Poison, and now they're putting Burn on. I think Poison is probably just objectively better than Burn, so that's a bit of a nerf, but the fact that they're making it 2 turns and they're increasing the effect chance overall means that this artifact is probably more usable by different warriors. I don't know. I mean, there might be a hero that's released later that really wants to use this. As of now, we don't really have it. So I think this still is going to be an artifact that you throw onto one of your Wyvern killers if you need more debuffs. It'll just be better for that. All right, so here's Little Queen's Huge Crown. This thing basically just increased your damage against barrier, right? So now it just gives you a flat damage increase, and then also even more when they're granted a barrier. Okay. Yeah, that's probably better, because you're still getting the overall... Oh, actually, you're getting less damage against barriers now. But you're getting more damage just when they don't have a barrier. So, more consistent with less upside. I mean, again, that's fine. This seems like kind of a useless artifact still. Probably still just, yeah, a wyvern utility thing. Here's El's Fist. Almost no one uses this. Now they're giving it 10% more attack. That's okay. You know what? I wish they would have done this to, like, Durandal. We were talking about this. That was an artifact they could have buffed, because it gives CR boost, which is alright, but it doesn't really do anything else, and a lot of these artifacts are now less competitive because they don't have this on them, right? They're just free stats that you're getting by using these artifacts, and it feels like whenever they buff something, one of the ways they buff artifacts is giving it more stats, and Durandal doesn't have that, and it's a pretty underused warrior artifact, I think, so I feel like that should have been on the list. Maybe next time. They should probably put defense on it so I could keep using it on Sirmia. That would be sick. Looks like that's all the changes, though. Overall, I think pretty positive. It looks like they've definitely put in some things like Designer Lilibet and Celine to kind of fight back against, you know, the Caesarea Cleave, the Conqueror Lilius, like these early picks that are pretty dominant right now and have power crept the game pretty significantly. So overall, I think a pretty positive balance patch. Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for watching. Later.